I was asked to speak about anti-Semitism in the US, and it's a very complex topic, and this is just an overview. I've done a lot of work fighting against anti-Islamicism in the US, and of course anti-Semitism and anti-Islamicism share a number of factors, but there is an additional factor that I'm going to speak about with anti-Semitism, where it's actually coming both politically from the far left and the far right. And that is a bit of a difference, and it's very relevant to some of the data that I'm going to talk about. So first, let's go through some data on what's been going on with anti-Semitism in the United States. In 2019, the highest number of incidents of anti-Semitism since data began being tracked in 1979 on these things was reported. Now, incidents mean things like vandalism all the way up to, murder, right? But that is just the manifestations of the underlying rise in a phenomenon. So for every incident, the increase in people who might share anti-Semitic sentiments would be significantly more. Moreover, in 2019, the number of assaults, anti-Semitic assaults in the United States rose 56% from 2018. And that was after a significant rise in the number of anti-Semitic assaults between 2017 and 2018. So this is a significant increase. And so we want to try to understand why is this happening? What's going on? Obviously, there's been a lot of data on how the internet has been used by a number of different groups, both on the far right and on the far left, to promote anti-Semitism. The internet has become a major factor, right? There are documents such as the Protocols for the Elders of Zion that are being circulated by a variety of groups, right? The protocols have long been discredited. They're known to be produced by, czarist agents in Russia when it was beneficial to the czar to scapegoat Jews. And so, this has been long understood, but they're being circulated by hate groups and by, in some cases, non-hate groups that have never looked into the veracity of these things and are circulating them. So that's a factor. But a couple of things we need to look at is the anti-Semitism coming from the right and the anti-Semitism coming from the left. Because in some ways the Jewish community has become sandwiched between these two things. As someone who's fought against anti-Islamicism as well, I'm very familiar with the increase in right-wing neo-Nazis, Ku Klux Klan, but also less clearly identifiable right-wing groups who have been promoting this sort of hate and rhetoric and things along these lines in the internet and elsewhere. Of course, we've seen rallies and things like that. So we have this increase on the right in anti-Semitism. These groups have become very heavily emboldened by President Trump, who has refused to sort of speak out against these groups. And that has led to sort of an emboldening and maybe perhaps more of a willingness for these groups to act on their otherwise hateful beliefs. The factor for anti-Semitism, because I know Professor Schanzer is going to speak about anti-Islamicism, and I think a lot of the things coming from the right, we see a commonality there between anti-Semitism and anti-Islamicism. But with anti-Semitism, what we also see is an extreme sort of element of anti-Semitism coming from the far left as well. And I think part of this comes from a blurring of the hard line, the hard ability to create a line between those who oppose current policies in Israel and those who are anti-Semitic. Certainly, there are many people who oppose current Israeli policies who are not in the least bit anti-Semitic, right? That's a political issue, and it's something that that is a major political issue, right? But there's been a crossing from that sort of anti-Israeli sentiment into anti-Semitism. Certainly, the majority of people who might have political concerns about what's going on in civil rights and humanitarian concerns about what's going on in the Middle East are certainly not anti-Semitic, but there has been a blurring and there has been a crossover to the point where we've seen in both the US and Europe that on campuses with strong BDS movements, what we've seen, even though the vast majority of people involved in BDS are not anti-Semitic at all, but what we've seen is a leakage, that there becomes a blurring, and anti-Semitic rhetoric becomes much stronger on these campuses. And we've seen it throughout. So there's famous cases. You've seen it, USC, UCLA. I'm going to actually just mention as an example a case that happened at a university in Western Michigan, where I actually got personally involved, where a student asked to have not have a test on Yom Kippur, and the professor said that if the student wrote a paper condemning Israeli policies, that he would give her the exception. Now, this student happened to oppose current Israeli policies anyway, but imagine any other group being told on a US campus that you have to denounce something in order to get this because we're stereotyping your group. And this was coming from a professor. And this has happened numerous times around the country, not only on campuses, but within movements. I'm a member of the Black Lives Matter movement. I strongly support it. But there were some issues within the movement early on where very strongly anti-Semitic rhetoric came out from a couple of people. It did not reflect 99.99% of the people in the movement, but it has become an issue not only on the far right, but on the left as well. And it has created a line where, in some cases, Jews have been targeted both ways. And it's a fundamental problem in the United States. And I think when you look at the increase in crimes, hate crimes against Jews, the majority in the increase are coming from the right, but there has also been a significant increase in hate crimes against Jews coming from the left. And it's a significant concern that I don't know what the answer is. And I wish I could give a good answer, right? You can't say, stop worrying about important issues like the plight of Palestinian people, right? That's an important issue. But at the same time, when that concern bleeds into not anti-Israeli policy, but actual anti-Semitism, and it's a hard line, right? Where is that line? But when it bleeds into that, when people start making anti-Semitic comments there's no question of what they are, this is a problem, and it's a significant concern. And I'm hoping that as a matter of religious freedom, both anti-Islamicism, anti-Semitism, we're seeing an increase in some cases with attacks on Buddhist temples because of some of the anti-Asian things that have arisen in recent months, that these things are viewed as something that has a commonality in many ways. And so that at the very least, we can fight against it on the sources that we know coming from the right. But with anti-Semitism, we also need to remember that it is not just coming from the right. And that is the reality. The data bears it out in very significant ways, and not just on campuses. Campuses have made the media. But if you look at the underlying data, it goes well beyond campuses.